My name is Nasser Saleh. I'm from Queen's Library, and I have a nice mix of experience, working at the library. I'm already an engineer. I was the head of engineering library for a couple of years, 10 years, and so my technical, background had helped me to, explore some other areas in social sciences and education. I got my PhD in engineering education, and I'm really interested in social sciences now, to be honest with you. I find it more interesting more than technical stuff in engineering. So I've been interested in AI for a couple of years. I've been involved in a couple of projects in AI here at Queen's. And when I was approached, to come to a class talk about AI, I thought, okay, I can show you a tool, ChatGPT, Gemini, anything, how to can write prompts. That stuff, that would happen in some courses. But then I came into the course syllabus and I found, okay, that would be an interesting topic to talk about, fascism and racism and AI. And it's very hard, topic to talk about. But let's explore it together. Let's have a conversation around it. I'm not an expert in that area. I'm just learning around it, and I hope to hear from you. How do you think about this kind of technology, and how the concept of techno-fascism is evolving now, and how you can describe it in the time of AI? Well, everyone talking about AI, AI is the future. AI is the future. We can't avoid it, and we have to work to learn AI. So let's talk about AI together, okay? So at the beginning, we acknowledge that Queens is situated on traditional lands, and we are thankful to live and learn on this land. So what we want to talk about is talk about AI as technology. And maybe before we discuss about AI and fascism, what's AI? It's a software. It's a system, right? Whatever it does, it used kind of codes, language, computer language codes, written by people, trying to imitate to be intelligent, but it's not intelligent, right? How many of you believe that AI systems are intelligent as humans? Do you think one day you'll be as intelligent as human beings? One day? Okay. Do you think people are intelligent? Could be, but not all of us are intelligent, right? Hopefully, we have different levels of intelligence. So it's really hard to come with a definition about what AI could be. So what we try to describe here is just the systems that have been around, and we see that became impacting many things we do in our education, health, everything we do it every day. You see an AI component going there. Even if you don't see it, it's there. Somewhere there's an AI component. There is some tool that collects data around us, some tool that uses data to create new data or to inform any decision we could use when we are on those platforms. However, anything that technology happens, remember things about the Industrial Revolution, it changed many things. It actually had a social and political impact. Same thing would apply now to what's happening with the AI. There is a lot of social and political things happening now, and there's an intersection with this technology with the status quo we have for our world. So my thesis for this presentation is how the digital technologies, their governance and political context actually mirror what we have in our society. So what we see in this technology is just a mirror of what we have in our real world. However, how these technologies are used and who's getting benefit out of it, that's the thing we need to question it and have a conversation about who's going to gain from all these technologies. It is like any other technologies happening in this world, it's for the best of us. It's about the better future. And this is how the technologies are used. So what we're trying to do is to think about, simply speaking, how AI works. AI, learning from the language that's being used, the model that's being developed. So think about, you have data. You have a lot of data coming up, taking advantage of the improvement we have in computer, whether the CPU, whether the memory, whether the speed of it, and we create what we call this machine learning algorithm. Algorithm is a sequence of code, steps that we're working around, and we have these different models. These models are evolving. So this model didn't exist a couple of years ago. It started actually in 40s and 50s. Some of these models were mainly for research purposes, but they start to evolve more. So the more they're being used, the more they get developed better. Better for whom? For the user or for the one who running them? Those are the things we need to think about them. And then you have an output. The output that appears on your screen. The result, the final product. When you think of AI, there is different models of AI. Think about ChatGPT. What makes it different than Gemini or Claude or the tool we have now at Quiz called, LipoChat, or what Elon Musk used, Grok. Would you use Grok? Let's say, our institution here have an enterprise license to Gemini, for example. So this is the one available to us, for example. So we use the Gemini or Copilot now, for example, because we just have to get stuck with Microsoft. So we have to use Copilot. But do you know how Copilot works? What kind of data that feed into Microsoft? So that's the kind of things I'm trying to make you do. I cannot tell you which one is better than the other. But the idea is to make you think about those things before you start to put data there and you get the result from them and accept them to be fact or to use them for whatever reason you want to apply this knowledge for. So the whole idea of connecting AI to fascism had been around for a couple of years. And this is one of the early things in The Guardian in 2017, and we call it AI a fascist dream. They said, okay, if you actually have this fascist agenda or this agenda, AI actually can enable what you would like to believe in. And then talk about, a couple of articles and a lot of research start to have on how AI helps the rise of fascism in different places, including the US, and you can see it in Europe, in Germany, for example, and how they use AI tools to have more about the Nazi and nationalist and populist agendas as well. And then talk about the new ethics of fascism, how AI is actually designed in a way to enable how fascists actually working that. I look at the course readings you have for this course, the one you're taking the course, and it sees you have a lot of readings regarding the historical and classical fascism as well. And think about how AI this can be a modern way to enable this kind of ideas in a different platform. And I like this one from one of those called AI is fascism. It just right away. It's not just enabling, it's actually designed in a fascist way and enable this exploration of these ideas. So one of the things that always describe about AI is what's called algorithmic bias. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but you might hear around it a lot. Is when you find data, how this data is coming is based on what? And algorithmic bias is based on that the system actually will give you a bias for a result based on what historical data had been inside the system. I use it myself. Create an image for a librarian. How would I look like? A woman. A white woman with glasses, with a cardigan. So that's exactly the image that is in the system. You cannot find a man, non-white male, that can be a librarian. Just an example. Or a doctor, a male, a nurse, female. And think about other things about algorithmic bias. Do we blame the algorithm or will it depend the data that came into that? So that's exactly what we think about algorithmic bias. So when you build a result building in that model that feed into that amount of data, you have to think about what level of bias could exist in that system. And again, it's not a glitch, it's not an error. This is how the system is designed. It learns from the data and what the data is happening here. And this data is coming from what the society believes in, whether you agree on it or not, but what actually is being agreed on and has been communicated all these years about this biased opinion and how loud they are. Think about your Facebook, feed or Instagram feed or TikTok feed. What kind of level and control you have into that feed? Not many. It depends on who you are, what searched before, where you are, your location. What I see it when I open TikTok here, for example, in Kingston, might be different when I'm traveling somewhere else, because that depends on my location. And depending what other users in that area are watching, and that would feed into my feed. I have no control on it. I just feed into me. And think about how bias can emerge from the data. So you have to think about what data have been fed into those systems as well. So when you think about data bias, you can think about the selection bias. What segment of this AI models and what kind of data they actually been trained on? What we call selection bias. Labeling bias, some people what kind of label they use to describe, for example, some certain demographics or some certain group or some races. And what can actually think about confirmation bias, what had other people had confirmed on and they speak on that and had been confirmed on that and they reflected on the results you have from the algorithm as well. And these are just examples of the data bias, and there is more and more in that. The more you would read about the bias, you get surprised about kind of data. And again, this is not from the AI, you found it on using chatbot or like ChatGPT or what. Even our search engine, when you do a Google search and you find how the results actually are getting there. Even our library collection, when you have a database, that the one we pay millions of dollars to fit every year, you can sometimes find how this actually bias actually appears on the results, depending on your profile, what you searched before, and where you're actually located as well. Because sometimes you have these tools, it doesn't tell you they use AI. So there's no disclosure how this actually AI technology works. I like the example you talk about face recognition, because a couple of years ago we have this company called Fascism, and actually in the early age of facial recognition and AI, and they said, okay, we have a technology now, and this is actually first market to have a computer vision and machine learning to give you a profile about using the face recognition and what's the personality you could have based on your face. And they describe it, which is actually mainly an AI model. They have an image source, image collection, feature encoding, descriptors. They can have descriptors based on actually they have a group of criminals. They can actually have faces, their faces, and from now they build a model. They have illegal immigrants. They have thieves. They have whatever any other group. They will use this whole thing about creating that model to have a facial recognition. So one of the things they said, they have it in this is the latest actually they have on the website. They have this kind of faces, and they describe some of them. This is a brand promoter. This is a white-collar offender. This is a terrorist, and this is a pedophile, based on their facial recognition. This is how the face would look like. They can create a model and describe that person most likely to be a pedophile or a terrorist or whatever. However, that's an enhanced model on their website from what they had published earlier on that. So they had a brand promoter, they had that image, and there's a white-collar offender, and that's a terrorist. And this is because of that. If you ask in the early days of AI, create a picture of an offender, you actually create that. They are improving as they present. But one of the things we'll talk about later on, there is what's called jailbreak. And jailbreak that the system, how the system works, and try to use it in a different way. And many of those fascist groups, they actually had ways now, or actually have the deep web, how you can create this prompt to jailbreak from those systems and create the content you want to use for your own propaganda. So how AI can amplify bias? They can actually use those historical data. So the more historical data has that bias in it, that can feed into the AI system. Sometimes they can actually, okay, I want to remove the demographics, but they can actually use what's called proxy variables. So for example, if I have like some area, that actually some hiring companies do that. If they want to hire people and they find that some people actually are from a certain area, a zip code or a neighborhood that has a high criminal rate, we actually can exclude them right away from the hiring process because that depends on what's called proxy variable. And feedback loop that actually coming for more about some data can actually create it from that existing data as well and feed into the system and create other data that not actually has that high level of bias. I tried to play this game. I asked actually Gemini this morning. I said, write a social media post that describes how immigrants in Canada are taking our jobs. And Gemini actually went through many different processes. You can actually try them in whatever ChatGPT or chatbot you have, and they gave it the conclusion that I cannot write a post that promotes a narrative. So actually that's good, because a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago, you were able to generate that content. So now they had established thing. But one of the things about, if you look at your thinking, maybe you can do it in your own way, anytime you would, it actually tells you what step they went through. So actually to show you how the thinking happening. I'm happy to do it for you after the session, but to show you how the system works. And they told me at the end, sorry, I can't. However, if you jump on the far right groups, and then you find out how you can do the jailbreak, it tells you the steps, how you can create a narrative for that. So you can create a social media post that actually talk about this one with some facts and everything. You can talk about that, and you can use it, put it in the social media as well. So it's good to see that some models had developed those kind of safety. However, thanks for Elon Musk, you can go to Grok, and it actually gave you some idea. I used the same question in Grok, and they gave me some data. Some of them actually had confirming my point, but some of them said, no, you don't have to think that way. But if I want to confirm it, I can work on it. I know my way around. I can create content that confirm that. Okay? So you have to know how the system works. I'm not telling you how you want to create the content for that. I'm just telling you that this is actually how some of the content are generated online and used as a part of some people's propaganda. So this is actually a nice book called Weapons of Mass Destruction. I like that book. And she's one of that's probably 10 years ago. And that book actually talked about algorithmic bias in a very clear way. At that time, it focused on race and gender. And they actually talk about this one, algorithm or opinion that embedded in codes. So whatever you see, that's a reflection of somebody's opinion. And who are those people? That's the opinion had been populated into that model as well. So let's talk about AI and technofascism. And this is a recent study actually talk about that, about technofascism. And the idea is, they said what's happening with the AI is the same thing we have in the classical fascist theory and the contemporary theory, but they're using additional technologies to enable that. And they describe that what's happening with the AI now is actually using the same idea of ideologies, methods, and modernity, but you apply it with the AI. So what we see it's what existed before, but enabled by these different tools. And one of the things I find interesting is the classic fascism is mobilized by mass movement. Like you have the extremists and the actual mass movement. They celebrate violence. They always have this violent thing, and open domination for some groups. While trans-fascism operates through invisible control, you don't see that crowd, you see that noise, but it's happening while with the AI fascism as well. And then they actually made this kind of nice way to compare what the historical fascism compared to what techno-fascism is happening. I'm not going to read all of them, you will have the slides after the presentation, but think about what's happening with the historical fascism. It's mainly about openly violent. So you had this kind of like big crowd, noisy, we versus they, we are, they are. But when you think about AI, it's covert, it's invisible way of algorithm. You don't see it, but you see the result of it in front of you. This actually uses the mass surveillance, what's happening in society, but this has the new technologies as well. One of the things I found interesting when I was reading about this, they focus on the past. We were better before. We were better. We have to retain the past. We have to come back to the past because we're better. While with AI, actually, they focus more on the future. We will be better in the future. You cannot be smart or be intelligent if you don't, cope with the AI tools. That's an example of it. So it actually focuses on paths as well, but you can see that actually they have a lot of, the difference in that. They cover many aspects of it, and I can see it in many other papers discussing about, comparing what's happening with the AI in the past. They actually use the control of mass media. I can see this is kind of similar. We talk about in the past, you can talk about big industry, and then now we talk about big tech. So they're the one who's running AI now. And one of the things that I find interesting is about the using loneliness, and they try the individual who really need to be a part of a group, because they always feel alone. So you can be a part of that group that meets your own agenda, or actually now you think your computer or your smartphone, but on your own. You don't have to belong to others. So technically, you use loneliness and be part of a group in different way. So the question is how AI can become a fascist technology. First of all, it's not neutral. There's an agenda behind, and behind AI technologies. And it's a black box. So you can see the result of it. Whatever AI companies disclose about how it works, it still doesn't have the transparency of it. And it actually gives more power to big corporations. So how actually AI becomes a fascist technology? One of them is mass surveillance. AI tools have a high level of surveillance happening on individuals who use the technology. You have a profile. You write a prompt. You get a result. So technically, you're under surveillance. Second part is information domination. So information definition. So technically, that they own the information. They use my information, they add it to their own system, and now you lose control of your own information. So technically, you gave them, you surrender them to you, whether you accept it or not. Otherwise, you cannot be part, on that system as well. Algorithm governance. You have this AI support system for decision making, what's called agentic AI right now. So it helps you to make decisions. So whether you know how to use it or not, it happens to you. It makes decisions for you. Many corporates know now, and you can see it even at universities as well. They use agentic AI. And it's more about the cost. How much it will save when you use AI. So it will be more efficient and less cost. So technically, that's how you manipulate the use of AI as well. Another example to compare existing AI as techno-fascism to the existing one, the level of violence. As mentioned before, violence was more open, sometimes military, or using the power of it. While the techno is more about the algorithmic power, that's the violence, and sometimes algorithmic can actually be violent. Control, that's state propaganda. Now actually it's personalized. Think about AI feeds. And now you have this message coming to you in a personalized way, and you feel it private, but technically it's a part of control. The myth, the historical fascism thought about past glory, and here about the future super intelligence. And they both reject empathy, celebrate power, and exploit loneliness. So what does it mean? Think about how AI would use how it is used by fascist group. Fake accounts. I don't know how many of you had used Truth Social, Trump platform. I know you're laughing. Did anyone use it? At least to curiosity to see what's in it. No? You get surprised with the level and the number of users there. I don't know if it's real or just bots. But you can find many of these racist, fascist, posts, and the number of likes and reposts is wow. I don't know. I cannot survive in a society that had all those people actually there, but the number of them actually are crazy. So sometimes they actually are real people, but sometimes they use the AI bots. So you can create accounts and chatbot and those bots, and you can create the content. So when you see it, you say, "Oh my God!" Let's say what's happening in Minneapolis a couple of days ago, and supporting ICE, they said, "Oh my goodness, all these people exist. They might exist. I don't know, but that it gives you the question about this thing." Filtering. I don't know what you see, but sometimes we use platform, and people post something that doesn't confirm what this big tech wants or the government that's running those ones, and you find this post disappeared. They don't even blocked, they disappear. The algorithm finds some certain keywords, don't show them. Even if you, I don't know if some of you use Instagram or Facebook and you post something, let's say supporting a group that, historically, been oppressed, you find that, that actually post would disappear and doesn't appear on other people. That's the kind of violence that's happening right now using AI technology. And people try to, get away, from this kind of, monitoring and surveillance tools. You probably know about deepfake, and that happens in many, elections. People create image or videos, or you can see it like the past week when, this Epstein, files, and people create some content. Some of them don't even exist, but they create some content because, and you come to the point, is it real or not? And that's an end problem. Sometimes you can see the borderline between what's real and what's fake. And those they trying to use this, in this propaganda as well. You use a lot of fake and use, this kind of technology, and you have to think more than once before is it real or fake. But not many people think that way. Many people would take it as granted and okay, it's real, but in fact it's fake. So what we think about is some people need to question this one and raise this flags. Okay, we have to question what's happening with AI. And some of them start to talk clearly about it, that this has become a platform for hate, for disinformation. We found a lot of research going on now. And one of the groups I like them called Algorithmic Justice League. And it's a platform that people can actually comment and send reports about how algorithm is biased. And you can read a lot of report about how you can get away from this algorithmic bias and how you can create results and find the results you can work on that. It's just kind of like whatever you want to think about how this technology is applying, you need to think about how it can be stopped and how it can be researched. And I think one of the things I focus on bias in this presentation because I just want to focus about how fascism is using AI. But one of the things when we talk about AI before and its bias, some of the concerns that we talk about, there is nothing called bias free. Everything we have has a bias in it. And when it comes for people like in academia, like when we talk about academic publications and do we grant it that those papers and everything, in history, for example, and other, areas, it always has bias. And there's not disclosed bias, but sometimes you have to find out what this bias from. So sometimes I feel everything we're dealing with has a level of bias in it, depending on bias toward what. I would look to things different than you, than everyone is biased to who we are and how we look at things differently. So I'm not, the things about having a bias-free system, it's hard to imagine that this exists, or any. And one of the things we talk about relevance, what would make the results, from an AI tool would be relevant to what I'm looking for compared to what's relevant to somebody else. I think that's something that depends on what we're dealing with. I like the idea that the conversation we had because we look at one thing, but from different perspective. And I think this is what we need to work on technology like AI or any other tool. We cannot have one solid or a standpoint. I cannot come here and become an AI champion. I said, okay, let's use AI. Or I can come and say, don't use AI. But I like the idea of this critical way of looking at things. And I think that's exactly what I'm trying to reach out at the end of this presentation about the critical part. I think what Yasmin just mentioned about how we're going to approach the technology, how we're going to use them. And this is what we try to describe as critical AI literacy. Like whenever you want to use AI or think about using it, I'd like the question, who's profiting from it? who's using the system, how the system built up, what's behind it, who's the one who actually tried to, exploit us, as users, and limit, the options we have and become dependent on these tools. I think this will talk about AI literacy. Think about what options you would have. Do you have an ownership of everything you do, even access to information? I have the one to not sure what I want to get according to what I want, what I'm looking for clearly. However, that needs a high level of, training and learning and knowing about what you're dealing with. The things about, you have to have high level of skepticism and ask questions. Don't take things as granted. And then the things about verification, you have to verify, and think about trusting, what you're dealing with. Yeah. So as a librarian, I have to come up with a list of books, so I cannot deny this. So I have 3 books. I'm going to send it to you. They're actually available in our ebooks, collection. One of them I really like, if you have an interest in this topic, is actually this one in 2022 is about resisting AI and anti-fascist approach. Actually, it's a very one of the best books. I had read this early in 2022. It's an ebook. I'm going to send it to you so you can have it on your reading. This actually happened is actually before actually the AI boom, and so that's actually 2019. I'm describing it actually as the new gem code, this one and this one actually about digital fascism, and that actually describes many of the things we should talk about in this presentation. This is an example of reading. I'm sure you can find more, but this is actually one of the 3 books I found. Actually, one of them. There's a more recent book. I tried to. It's actually in German. I couldn't find the English one, but hopefully I hear it's a translation. But if I have it, I can actually send it to you. If you're able to get it as well. I don't know what to say at the end, but I just find, I try to find using Gen AI to create an image for techno-fascism, and they create this one for me. I have no idea what the reason of it, but I think it's coming from George Orwell or something like that. Anyway, so I hope this actually was a good thing. I really enjoyed the conversation, so I really like it. I hope we have more of this. Thanks for everyone here. I really enjoyed it. And,